By 6 in the evening, before a single titled guest had crossed the threshold of West Haven Hall, Miss Cecily Harcourt had already discovered where the family believed she belonged. Not beside them. Not behind them. Below them. The proof lay on the long mahogany dining table beneath the glitter of 40 candles, written in a careful black hand upon a small ivory card. Miss Cecily Harcourt. The card had not been placed near the Earl of West Haven, though he was her uncle by marriage. It had not been set near the Countess, who called Cecily dear child whenever strangers were listening. It had not even been placed beside Lady Lavinia Rowley, who had once shared Cecily's nursery lessons and now spoke to her as if kindness were a gown she had outgrown. Cecily's card sat far down the table, beyond the younger cousins, beyond a visiting clergyman's wife, beyond a deaf great-aunt who slept through most dinners, almost at the shadowed end where the governess would have been seated had there been children in the house. Below the salt. Below the family. The footman beside her saw it at the same moment and lowered his eyes with the guilty swiftness of a servant who had not committed the cruelty but would be blamed for noticing it. Cecily did not move at first. Around her, West Haven Hall breathed with the disciplined panic of an aristocratic household preparing to impress a man too powerful to offend. Silver was polished until it held the candles like small moons. Crystal glasses stood in ranks. The scent of beeswax, hothouse roses, and roasted game drifted beneath the painted ceiling. In the corridor, maids hurried with warmed plates. In the drawing-room, the Countess of West Haven inspected the flowers as if a crooked stem might cost them a duchy. Tonight His Grace Lucian Pembroke, Duke of Alder-mere, would dine beneath their roof. The Earl required his favour. Lady Lavinia desired his admiration. Lady Westhaven expected both to be secured before the soup was cleared. Cecily had spent the afternoon helping make such ambition look effortless. She had corrected the seating list when Lady Westhaven forgot that a baron's widow must not be placed below a knight's unmarried daughter. She had chosen the white roses because Lavinia's complexion looked finest against pale flowers. She had copied menu cards in a hand steady enough to conceal the fact that no one had asked whether she would be tired. She had even soothed Mrs. Vale, the housekeeper, when one of the kitchen boys dropped a dish and looked ready to faint from fear. Cecily was useful. That had always been the shape of her welcome. Useful enough to mend lace, read letters aloud to Lady Westhaven, arrange visits, remember birthdays, write notes of condolence, smooth quarrels, and disappear before gratitude became necessary. But usefulness was not belonging. She had learned that lesson early, and Westhaven Hall had taught it with excellent manners. Miss Harcourt, whispered the young maid near the sideboard. Her name was Annie, though Lady Westhaven rarely used it. She held a folded napkin in both hands, twisting the linen until its corners bent. I didn't place it there, miss. I swear I didn't. Cecily looked at the girl's pale face and understood at once. If Lady Westhaven found the card creased or questioned, blame would travel downward until it reached someone who could not defend herself. That was the natural law of houses like Westhaven. Fault descended. Credit rose. Cecily lifted the card gently from its silver holder. Of course you did not. Her ladyship said every card must be perfect. Annie's voice trembled. If she thinks I touched yours wrong, she'll send me back to the laundry. Cecily turned the card over as if inspecting the thickness. Then she must not think so. But miss, it's already marked. Then I marked it. Annie stared at her. You can't say that. I can say many things when no one expects me to be listened to. Cecily smiled faintly, not because the matter was amusing, but because the girl looked as though kindness might undo her completely. Go and see whether Mrs. Vale needs help with the dessert plates. I will manage this. Annie hesitated only a second before curtsying and slipping away. Cecily remained beside the table, holding her own name between two gloved fingers. The glove on her right hand had been mended twice along the thumb, with stitches so small no one would notice unless they had once been poor enough to become expert in concealment. Her gown was dove-grey silk, plain from a distance and carefully rescued from ruin up close. That afternoon, Lady Westhaven had sent it to her chamber with a message delivered by Lavinia herself. Something modest, Cecily. We must not confuse the guests. Cecily had understood. A dependent cousin must be neat but not admired. Present but not memorable. Grateful but not eager. She must never stand too near the light. The dining room doors opened, and Lady Lavinia Rowley entered as if the house had been built to provide her with doorways. She wore blue satin trimmed with seed pearls, and her fair hair had been arranged in soft loops that made the candlelight seem to gather willingly around her. She paused when she saw Cecily beside the table. Her gaze dropped to the card. A smile touched her mouth. "Oh, dear. Had they put you all the way down there?" Cecily replaced the card in its holder. "So it appears." Lavinia moved closer, trailing one finger along the back of a chair. "Mamma says it is best. His Grace must understand the family arrangement at once." "The family arrangement?" "That you are attached to us, but not exactly of us." Lavinia lifted the card before Cecily could stop her. "It saves confusion." The card bent between her fingers. A small sound followed. Not loud. Not dramatic. Only the dry whisper of fine paper giving way. Lavinia looked down at the tear as though it had surprised her. "How clumsy of me." The footman at the door went perfectly still. Cecily felt the room narrow around that little broken edge. Her name had not been struck through. It had not been erased. It had simply been damaged enough to make its damage deniable. That was Lady Lavinia's gift. She could wound without leaving a weapon in her hand. "Give it to me, please," Cecily said. Lavinia arched a brow. "You needn't sound so solemn. It is only a place card. Then you will not mind returning it." For a moment they looked at one another across the polished table, and in that small silence the difference between them stood as plainly as rank. Lavinia had prospects, jewels, parents, and a future arranged like flowers in a vase. Cecily had a room at the back of the East Wing, a quarterly allowance she never saw directly, and the memory of a father who had died trusting relatives who spoke beautifully at his funeral. Lavinia released the torn card. "There. No harm done." Cecily held the two joined halves carefully. "No. None that will trouble you." A flash of annoyance crossed Lavinia's face, too quick for a stranger to catch. "You have grown sharp lately." "I have grown accurate." Lavinia laughed, but the sound was thin. "Do be careful tonight. Dukes are accustomed to women who know their place." Cecily looked at the card in her hand. "Then His Grace should find this dinner most educational." Lavinia's eyes narrowed. Before she could answer, Lady Westhaven swept in with a rustle of black silk and diamonds, her expression already sharpened by expectation. "Why are you both standing idle?" The Duke's carriage was seen at the lower gate. Every servant straightened. Every candle seemed to burn higher. Lady Westhaven's gaze fell to Cecily's hands. "What is that?" Lavinia turned instantly sweet. Cecily was adjusting her card. "Mamma." Cecily felt Annie's frightened glance from the far doorway. She folded the torn edge beneath her thumb. It was creased. "I am smoothing it." Lady Westhaven came close enough for Cecily to smell violet water and cold disapproval. "You will not make a scene over seating." "No, my lady. Nor will you look injured. Men of consequence dislike female displays." "I shall remember. You are here because your uncle is generous. Do not mistake usefulness for importance." The word settled gently, almost elegantly, which made them harder to resist. Cecily had heard versions of them for years. In bedrooms. In corridors. At breakfast tables. After every small humiliation that required her cooperation to remain invisible. She lowered her eyes, not in surrender, but to look once more at her name. The tear crossed the lower corner of Harcourt. Not enough to destroy it. Enough to show it had been handled carelessly. She smoothed the card with the side of her thumb until it lay flat again. Then she placed it back at the end of the table, below the salt, below the family, where everyone expected her to sit and be grateful for the chair. Outside, carriage wheels rolled over the gravel. The sound travelled through the dining room like a verdict. Lady Westhaven turned toward the entrance hall, diamonds trembling at her throat. Lavinia gathered her smile. Servants moved into position. Cecily remained still for one heartbeat longer, her hand resting beside the torn place card. She did not pray to be noticed. She had long ago stopped asking the world for miracles. She only drew a careful breath, straightened her shoulders, and prepared to become invisible in front of the most powerful man who had ever entered Westhaven Hall. The first thing Cecily noticed about the Duke of Alder-mere was not his height, though he stood taller than Lord Westhaven by several inches, nor the severe cut of his black evening coat, nor the quiet gleam of authority that seemed to travel ahead of him into the entrance hall. It was his stillness. Every other person at Westhaven Hall appeared to lean toward him the moment he entered, as if rank possessed gravity. Lady Westhaven descended upon him with diamonds at her throat and triumph already arranged upon her face. Lord Westhaven bowed too deeply. Lady Lavinia softened her mouth into the expression she practiced before mirrors. Even the servants seemed to hold their breath. His Grace Lucian Pembroke did not rush to fill the silence with charm. He allowed it to exist. He removed his gloves with unhurried precision, handed them to the butler, and looked once around the hall with eyes the colour of winter rain. Cecily stood several paces behind Lady Westhaven, exactly where she had been instructed to stand, near enough to be summoned, far enough to be forgotten. She lowered her gaze before the Duke's eyes could find her. That was habit, not shyness. At Westhaven Hall, a woman without fortune survived by making herself easy to overlook. "Your Grace, we're honoured beyond words," Lady Westhaven said, sweeping into a curtsy that somehow made welcome sound like possession. "You've made our house the envy of half the county." "I'm grateful for your invitation," the Duke replied. His voice was low, controlled, and stripped of every unnecessary softness. "I trust one haven't kept dinner waiting." "Not at all," Lord Westhaven said quickly. "We'd have waited until midnight, had it pleased you." A faint pause followed. The Duke's gaze moved to the Earl, then away. "I hope that won't be necessary." It was not a jest, yet something in the dryness of it made Lavinia laugh as though he had paid her a compliment. Cecily did not laugh. She had spent too many years observing rooms from their edges not to recognize a man who disliked being hunted. The Duke greeted Lady Lavinia with perfect courtesy and no warmth beyond what etiquette required. That did not discourage her. She lowered her lashes. She offered him a smile. She spoke of the journey, the roads, the weather, and the tiresome state of country hospitality as if Westhaven Hall were a stage and she its brightest candle. The Duke answered each remark with enough politeness to satisfy manners and not enough interest to reward hope. Then, just once, his eyes lifted past Lavinia's shoulder and found Cecily. It lasted less than a second. It was enough. Cecily felt the glance not as admiration, not as curiosity, but as recognition of an irregularity in the pattern. A loose thread. A misplaced note. A person standing where no guest was meant to stand, wearing a gown too plain for family and too fine for service. Lady Westhaven noticed the direction of his gaze and moved at once. "Cecily, dear, don't hover. You know how it looks." The word dear was polished enough to cut glass. Cecily stepped forward and curtsied. "Your Grace." The Duke inclined his head. "Miss Harcourt." Her name, spoken so precisely, startled her more than it should have. Lady Westhaven's smile thinned. "Our poor Cecily is a great help to me in small domestic matters. She's almost one of us." Almost. There it was again, laid gently at Cecily's feet like a chain covered in ribbon. The Duke did not look at Lady Westhaven when he answered. He looked at Cecily. "I'm told small domestic matters are often the only reason great houses remain standing." Cecily's breath caught. Lavinia's fan stilled. Lady Westhaven gave a light laugh. "How generous you are! But we mustn't let practical little virtues detain us. Dinner is ready." They moved toward the dining room in order of consequence. The Duke offered his arm to Lady Westhaven because propriety demanded it. Lord Westhaven guided Lavinia forward with the careful pride of a man presenting an investment. Cecily followed behind a widowed cousin who smelled faintly of lavender and medicinal drops. She kept her hands folded, her face calm, and her mind fixed on one simple task. Reach the chair. Sit down. Disappear. The dining room blazed with candles. Firelight glowed along the gilt frames of dead Westhaven ancestors who stared down with the smug patience of people whose places had never been questioned. At the upper end of the table, Lady Westhaven indicated the Duke's seat at her right hand, with Lavinia placed opposite in the clear path of his attention. Everything had been arranged for conquest. Cecily's chair waited near the lower end. Her torn place card stood beside the plate, smoothed but not healed. She moved toward it quietly, hoping only that no one would remark upon the distance. Hope was foolish. Lavinia saw the card at once. She tilted her head with pretty concern. "Oh, Cecily, they've tucked you away after all. I suppose Mama thought it best. You're almost family, aren't you?" The words traveled lightly, but the table heard them. A small ripple passed among the guests. Not shock. Recognition. The satisfaction of seeing a social truth named without the burden of admitting cruelty. Cecily placed her hand on the back of her chair. The wood felt cold through her glove. She did not look at the Duke. She would not ask a stranger to rescue her from a sentence her own family had been writing for years. "It's a comfortable place," she said quietly. Lavinia smiled. "Of course it is. You never complain." A footman drew out Cecily's chair. At the head of the table, Silver shifted. Someone cleared his throat. Lady Westhaven began speaking of the soup, too quickly. Then the sound came. A chair moved. Not Cecily's chair. Not a servant's. The scrape of carved mahogany against polished floor crossed the dining room with astonishing force. Conversation stopped as if a hand had closed over it. Cecily turned. The Duke of Alder-mere had risen. Every face followed him. He did not ask permission. He did not explain himself to the Earl. He simply took hold of the back of his own chair and lifted it aside before the nearest footman could recover from surprise. "Your Grace," Lord Westhaven said, colour rising in his cheeks, "I'm sure we can adjust whatever you require." "I don't require adjustment," the Duke said. "I require honesty." The words fell cleanly. Lady Westhaven's diamonds trembled with the movement of her throat. "I don't understand." "No," the Duke said. "I imagine that's convenient." He carried the chair himself, not far, only the length of the table, yet the distance seemed immense because every inch crossed a boundary the Westhavens had believed invisible. He placed the chair beside Cecily's. Not above her. Not opposite her. Beside her. The footman looked stricken, uncertain whether to assist or pretend not to see. The Duke spared him by sitting before anyone could move. Cecily remained standing, her fingers still on the back of her chair. She could hear her own heartbeat. She could hear the fire. She could hear Lavinia's fan close with a small snap. The Duke turned his head slightly, enough for Cecily alone to feel addressed, though the whole room listened. "If Miss Harcourt's beneath this family, then I'll sit beneath it with her." Silence. Complete, candle-lit silence. Cecily had known silence as punishment, silence as dismissal, silence as the space into which her wishes vanished. This silence was different. It belonged to the people who had finally been made to see themselves. Lady Westhaven's face did not change at once. Years of breeding held it in place. Only her eyes betrayed the blow. Lord Westhaven's mouth opened, then closed. He could not command a duke to return to his seat. He could not protest without admitting the insult. He could not laugh without making himself vulgar. Cecily sat because her knees had begun to feel unreliable, but she did it slowly enough to keep the last of her dignity. The Duke did not look triumphant. He did not smile at the room he had unsettled. He reached for the torn place card beside Cecily's plate and turned it between two fingers. His thumb rested lightly over the split in the paper. "Was this accident or instruction?" he asked, his voice low. Cecily looked at the card, then at Lady Westhaven's rigid face, then at Lavinia's bright, angry eyes. The answer had a shape. It had years inside it. But if she spoke it now, she would be accused of drama, ingratitude, ambition, and every other sin available to a woman without power. "It's only paper, Your Grace," she said. His gaze returned to hers. "Paper has ended marriages, transferred estates, and ruined reputations. It is rarely only paper." No one reached for the soup. No one dared. The Duke set the card down, but not before he had quietly separated the loose and torn corner from the place where it clung. Cecily saw the movement. So did no one else. He slipped that small broken piece beneath his cuff with the calmness of a man preserving evidence, then turned to the footman as though nothing unusual had occurred. "You may serve, if you please." Dinner resumed in fragments. Spoons trembled against porcelain. Lady Westhaven spoke of the roses. Lavinia praised the sauce with a voice too bright to be natural. Lord Westhaven attempted to discuss Parliament and received answers so brief they seemed to diminish him by the syllable. Besides Cecily, the Duke ate little and observed much. He did not overwhelm her with conversation. He did not force her into gratitude. Once, when a guest tried to speak around her as if she were a chair herself, he paused with his glass in hand and waited until the man faltered. Then he asked Cecily what she thought of the county roads after the last rain. It was a small question. It was also impossible to ignore. Cecily answered carefully, then more fully when he listened as though her opinion had weight. By the time dessert was carried in, the table had rearranged itself without a single servant moving a chair. Every glance now had to pass through the place where Cecily sat today. At last, when the ladies withdrew, Lady Westhaven touched Cecily's arm with fingers cold enough to feel like metal. Her smile remained flawless for the guests. Her voice did not. "You've had quite an evening, dear." Cecily looked toward the doorway where the Duke stood speaking to Lord Westhaven, his face unreadable. Then she looked back at the woman who had taught her the cost of being noticed. "Yes, my lady," she said. "I believe we all have." The punishment began before the gentlemen had finished their port. Lady Westhaven did not raise her voice. She never did when servants were near, and after an evening of being publicly corrected by a duke, she had become all Polish and poison. The ladies had withdrawn to the drawing-room, where the fire burned low and the tea service waited beneath a silver cover. Lady Lavinia stood by the pianoforte with one hand resting on its glossy edge, her blue satin gleaming like victory even though her face had not yet recovered from defeat. Two elderly guests murmured near the hearth. A baron's widow examined the embroidery on her reticule with the fierce attention of a woman determined not to witness anything dangerous. Cecily had taken a chair near the screen, neither hidden nor visible enough to be accused of sulking. Her hands were folded in her lap. Beneath one glove, her palm still remembered the pressure of the torn place card. Beside her plate, half of it had remained. The other half had vanished beneath the Duke's cuff with such calm purpose that for the first time all evening Cecily had felt something more alarming than humiliation. She had felt the beginning of consequence. Lady Westhaven crossed the room after pouring tea for the highest-ranking guest, though no one drank. "Cecily, dear," she said, and the sweetness of the words made Lavinia look down to hide a smile. "You will assist me with the lamps in the morning-room. The house is not improved by all of us crowding in here." Cecily rose at once. To refuse would be to create the very scene Lady Westhaven could punish. To obey was to step willingly into the smaller room where correction could take place without witnesses worth fearing. She followed through the connecting doors, past the oval mirror, past the cabinet of porcelain shepherdesses, into the morning-room that smelled faintly of lemon oil and old letters. Lady Westhaven closed the door, not quite fully. A narrow seam remained, perhaps by accident, perhaps because rage in a well-bred woman still required air. Lavinia came with them. She did not need to. That was why she did. "What possessed you?" Lady Westhaven asked. Her smile disappeared so completely that Cecily wondered how the drawing-room had ever believed in it. "I beg your pardon. Do not insult me with that face. You sat there as if you were a martyr in a chapel window." Cecily kept her hand still. "I sat where I was placed." "You encouraged him." Lavinia turned from the mantel. "Mamma is right. You looked so wounded that any gentleman might have felt obliged to do something dramatic. It's dreadfully embarrassing." His Grace did not seem embarrassed. The words escaped before Cecily could call them back. Lady Westhaven's eye sharpened. "His Grace is a duke. Men of that rank may behave oddly and have it called character. Women in your position do not have that luxury." "In your position." Cecily had heard those words whenever she had asked for a new pair of gloves, whenever she had wished to accompany the family to London, whenever she had spoken with too much wit in a room where Lavinia wished to shine. Her position was the invisible border drawn around every hope before it could grow large enough to be noticed. "I did not ask him to move his chair," she said. "No," Lavinia replied. "You only arranged to look pitiful beside a damaged card." Cecily looked at her cousin. "You damaged it." Lavinia laughed, but there was strain beneath the sound. Careful. That sounds like accusation. It is memory. Lady Westhaven stepped closer. Diamonds still glittered at her throat, but away from candlelight they looked hard rather than bright. You will not repeat such nonsense. Lavinia touched a card. You are behaving as though she struck down your inheritance. Cecily felt the sentence land in a place too old to be reached by anger alone. Inheritance. The word opened the locked chamber of her childhood before she could stop it. Her father's study in Surrey. The smell of ink. His hand resting gently on her head as he told her that Harcourts did not beg. Then the funeral. Lady Westhaven's black gloves. Lord Westhaven's grave voice explaining that affairs had been left in confusion, that debts were regrettable, that charity among relations was a sacred duty. Cecily had been 17, fatherless, and too numb to understand how quickly a young woman could be transformed from daughter to obligation. My inheritance was never discussed with me, Cecily said quietly. Because there was nothing to discuss, Lady Westhaven answered at once. Too quickly. Your father died with more affection than prudence. Your uncle has kept a roof over your head for 9 years. Gratitude would suit you better than injured pride. Lavinia moved nearer, smiling again. Dukes don't marry women who sit by the sideboard, Cecily. They certainly don't marry women who quarrel over scraps of paper. Cecily turned toward her fully. Then you have nothing to fear. Color touched Lavinia's cheeks. I'm not afraid of you. No, Cecily said. You are afraid he saw you clearly. The silence after that was small and violent in its restraint. Lady Westhaven lifted one hand, not to strike, not even close, but to stop the conversation before it escaped her control. Enough. You will not attend the musical tomorrow evening. Cecily's breath caught, though she had expected punishment. The musical had been planned for weeks. Neighbouring families would attend. The Duke, if he remained at Westhaven Hall as intended, would be present. I was asked to turn pages for Mrs. Ellison. Mrs. Ellison will survive without your assistance. It will look strange if I am absent. It will look modest. Lady Westhaven's voice hardened. And after tonight, modesty is necessary. You will remain upstairs with a headache. If His Grace asks after you, I shall say the excitement overtired you. That would not be true. Truth, Lady Westhaven said, is often a matter of presentation. Cecily looked from her aunt to Lavinia, then toward the narrow seam of open door. Beyond it, the drawing-room hummed with carefully repaired conversation. Farther still, men's voices sounded in the hall as the gentlemen began to rejoin the ladies. One voice, lower than the rest, paused near the morning-room door. Cecily did not turn. Lady Westhaven did not notice. Lavinia did. Her expression shifted for a fraction of a second, but the warning came too late. Tell me, said the Duke of Alder-mere from the threshold, which presentation requires Miss Harcourt to disappear? Lady Westhaven went still. Lavinia's hand tightened on the mantle until her knuckles paled. Cecily turned at last. The Duke stood just beyond the half-open door, one hand resting lightly on the frame, his face unreadable. He had not entered a private family scene. That would have been improper. He had simply arrived where the door had been left carelessly open, and the distinction was so exact that Cecily almost admired it despite the sudden pounding of her heart. Your Grace, Lady Westhaven said, recovering with astonishing speed. You must forgive us. A little household matter. Household matters appear to follow Miss Harcourt with unusual persistence. His gaze moved to Cecily. It held no demand, no triumph, no question designed to expose her. Only attention. Are you unwell? Lady Westhaven answered before Cecily could. She has had an overfull evening. I fear tomorrow's musical would be too much. I asked Miss Harcourt. The words were mild. They rearranged the room. Cecily felt the weight of 3 faces upon her. Lady Westhaven's warning. Lavinia's resentment. The Duke's stillness. She could have chosen peace. She had chosen it many times and called it wisdom because there had been no other name that allowed her to sleep. But something had changed at dinner when a chair crossed the floor. Not enough to free her. Enough to show the cage. I am not unwell, Your Grace, she said. Then I hope the musical will not be deprived of you. Lady Westhaven's smile trembled. How kind, but Cecily is not among the performers. Nor am I, the Duke replied. Yet I have been invited. Lavinia forced a laugh. Surely, Your Grace, your presence is rather different. Yes, he said. That is why I am careful with it. The words were quiet, but their meaning was not. Cecily lowered her gaze before gratitude could rise visibly to her face. She would not make him responsible for her composure. She would not stand before her family like a rescued child. If Lady Westhaven permits it, Cecily said, I will attend. The Duke's eyes rested on her for one measured heartbeat. Something like approval passed through them, though his expression did not soften enough for anyone else to claim it. Then I shall look forward to the evening. He inclined his head and withdrew, leaving the door open behind him this time. Lady Westhaven waited until his footsteps faded before she spoke. You are becoming careless. Cecily looked at the place where he had stood. No, my lady. Her voice was steady, which surprised her more than anyone. I believe I am becoming accurate. The Countess said nothing. That was the danger of it. Lavinia's face had lost every trace of practiced sweetness. In the silence that followed, Cecily understood that the torn card had not been the end of anything. It had been the first visible piece of a much older ruin. Somewhere inside Westhaven Hall, the Duke of Alder-mere now knew it too. By the next afternoon, the story had already outrun the horses that carried it. Before luncheon, Mrs. Vale heard from the baker's wife that His Grace had moved his chair for Miss Harcourt as though she were a duchess in disguise. By 2 o'clock, the village apothecary's wife had improved the tale until Cecily had refused the head of the table out of Christian humility. By 4, a note from Lady Alyson arrived with a line so sharp beneath its politeness that Lady Westhaven read it twice and folded it with trembling fingers. Everyone is most eager to see dear Miss Harcourt at the musical this evening. Cecily learned this only because she was in the little writing room mending a ribbon on Lavinia's music folio when the Countess came in carrying the note like an accusation. You will have to attend, Lady Westhaven said. Cecily looked up. I thought I was to remain upstairs with a headache. Apparently your health has become a matter of county interest. Lady Westhaven dropped the note upon the desk. Lady Alyson has written as if your absence would be remarked upon. Worse, His Grace sent a message through his secretary asking whether Miss Harcourt would favour the company with her opinion of the music. His Grace may phrase a command as courtesy, but I am not simple enough to miss the command. Cecily lowered the ribbon to her lap. She had slept very little. Whenever she closed her eyes, she heard the sound of the Duke's chair crossing the floor. It had not been a rescue in the way silly novels promised rescues. He had not carried her out of misery. He had simply placed himself beside it and made the whole table look. Somehow that had been more unsettling. I did not ask him to write, she said. No. You have mastered a more effective performance. Lady Westhaven moved toward the window, where grey daylight lay against the glass. You stand still and allow men to imagine depth. Perhaps His Grace imagined nothing. Dukes do not move chairs because they imagine nothing. The Countess turned back. You will attend, but you will not shine. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not look as though you have been singled out. Lavinia is to perform the Beethoven first, then the Italian song. You will turn pages for Mrs. Alyson and remain useful. Useful. The old word returned to its old place. Cecily stood. As you wish. Lady Westhaven studied her face. Do not be clever with me, Cecily. Cleverness is an ornament only in women who can afford consequences. After she left, Cecily remained beside the desk with the music folio in her hands. In the mirror above the mantel, she saw a woman in a plain grey afternoon dress, hair smooth, posture correct, expression composed enough to be mistaken for obedience. She wanted, suddenly and dangerously, to know what she might look like if she no longer arranged her face for survival. The thought frightened her. So she folded it away, finished the ribbon, and prepared for the evening. The musical began under the watchful glow of candles and expectation. Westhaven Hall's drawing room had been rearranged so that the pianoforte stood near the long windows, with chairs set in careful ranks for neighbouring families, visiting cousins, and those guests whose titles required better sight lines. Lady Lavinia wore white muslin embroidered with tiny blue flowers, a gown designed to look innocent while costing enough to feed a small parish for a winter. She accepted compliments as if they were tribute. Lord Westhaven moved among the gentlemen, speaking of estate improvements he had not yet paid for. Lady Westhaven smiled so steadily that no one unfamiliar with her would have guessed that fury had lived in her since dinner. Cecily sat near Mrs. Ellison with the music pages arranged on her lap. She had chosen a dark green gown she had altered herself from one of Lady Westhaven's discarded dresses. It was modest, as required, yet candlelight softened the colour and made her eyes appear darker than usual. Annie, passing with a tray, noticed and smiled before she remembered herself. That small smile steadied Cecily more than it should have. Then the Duke entered. The room changed at once. Conversation shortened. Shoulders lifted. Mothers adjusted daughters by inches, like flowers in a vase. Lucian Pembroke greeted his hostess, bowed to Lady Lavinia, and accepted his place near the front without allowing himself to be trapped by enthusiasm. His glance crossed the room only once before the music began. It found Cecily. It did not linger. It did not need to. Lavinia opened with brilliance. No one could deny it. Her fingers moved quickly and cleanly across the keys, and her face held the serene concentration of a woman certain that skill, beauty, and birth formed an argument no man could answer. The guests listened with the correct expressions. Lady Westhaven watched the Duke rather than her daughter. Cecily watched the pages for Mrs. Ellison, turning them at the proper moments, and found herself thinking that Lavinia's playing was perfect and strangely untouched. It displayed feeling without surrendering to it. When the last chord faded, applause filled the room. Lavinia rose, flushed and lovely. "Your Grace," Lady Westhaven said, turning toward Lucian with graceful confidence, "we must beg your judgment. Lady Lavinia has worked dreadfully hard." Lavinia lowered her gaze. "Mamma exaggerates. I'm sure His Grace doesn't wish to be made a critic." "On the contrary," Lucian said. "A critic is often more useful than an admirer." The room gave a light laugh, uncertain whether it had permission. Lady Westhaven's smile held. "Then you found the piece pleasing?" "It was executed with discipline." Lavinia's expression flickered. "Discipline is high praise, I hope." "It is praise," he said. "Though not always the same as feeling." The air shifted. Cecily felt it before she saw the Countess's fingers tighten around her fan. Lavinia's cheeks warmed, but she recovered quickly. "Perhaps Miss Harcourt can defend me. She has been turning pages all evening and must have formed an opinion." It was a graceful trap. If Cecily praised Lavinia too warmly, she made herself smaller. If she disagreed, she appeared jealous. If she said nothing, she returned to usefulness. Every face turned toward her. Cecily felt heat rise beneath her collar, but she kept her hand steady on the music. "I am not certain Lady Lavinia needs defending," she said. "Her playing is accomplished." Lavinia smiled. "How kind. But His Grace is right." The smile stopped. Cecily heard Lady Westhaven draw a quiet breath. The piece asks for more than accomplishment. It begins as a conversation with grief, not a display of victory. If one plays it too cleanly, the sorrow has no place to breathe. Silence settled, not cold this time, but alert. Mrs. Ellison, who had been pretending to study her spectacles, looked at Cecily with open surprise. "Well said," murmured an elderly gentleman near the hearth. Lucian leaned forward slightly. "You know the piece?" Cecily shook her head. "Not to play. Only to hear. That is often the more honest education." Lavinia gave a brittle laugh. "How mysterious you both make it sound." "It's only music." Lucian's eyes did not leave Cecily. "Few things are only what careless people call them." The words touched the room like the edge of a blade laid flat. "No blood. Only warning." Lady Westhaven moved quickly. "Cecily reads a great deal of sentiment into things. A habit of solitary young women, I fear." Cecily looked down at the score. The old instinct told her to retreat, to apologize, to fold herself small enough that peace might return. Instead she lifted her eyes. Solitude does give one time to listen. Someone near the back coughed to conceal amusement. Lady Ellison smiled into her tea. Lavinia turned to the Italian song at once, but the room had altered. It was not that Cecily had triumphed. Triumph belonged to women with jewels and mothers who planned campaigns. What she had done was worse for the West Havens. She had become interesting. The next performance passed with outward grace, yet Cecily felt the difference in every glance. Guests who had looked through her now looked at her and then away, recalculating. After the final applause, when tea was served and conversation resumed, Lucian approached the table where she stood sorting music. He did not stand too close. He left enough space for propriety, and somehow that space made his attention more intimate. "Miss Harcourt," he said, "you have made me reconsider a piece I had thought I understood." "Then I have been impertinent, Your Grace." "No. Impertinence announces itself. Truth usually enters quietly." She almost smiled. "Almost. You give truth more credit than society does. Society gives credit to whatever rank tells it to notice." His gaze moved briefly toward the room, where Lady Westhaven watched them with controlled alarm. "That does not make society wise." Cecily placed the last sheet of music into its folio. "Wisdom is rarely invited to dinner." This time his mouth softened, not quite into a smile, but near enough to disturb her composure. "Then perhaps it must be seated without permission." Her breath caught at the echo of the previous night. Before she could answer, Lord Westhaven approached with a laugh too hearty to be natural. "Your Grace, Lady Lavinia hopes to show you the old music cabinet. A family piece. Quite remarkable workmanship." Lucian inclined his head. "In a moment." Lord Westhaven faltered. One did not hurry a duke. One waited upon him and called it honor. Lucian turned back to Cecily. "I hope you will attend the Ellisons' dinner next week." Cecily knew at once that this was not a casual remark. It was an invitation offered before witnesses. A small shield. A dangerous kindness. "That decision belongs to Lady Westhaven," she said. "Does it?" His voice was quiet. "How curious." Then he bowed and moved away, leaving Cecily with the music in her arms and every watchful eye in the room measuring what had just occurred. Across the drawing room, Lady Westhaven's expression remained pleasant. Lavinia's did not. For the first time in years, Cecily understood that being unseen had protected her from envy as much as it had denied her affection. Now the protection was gone. And the woman who had torn a place card with a smile was watching as if she had only just begun. The next morning, Cecily found the past waiting for her on a silver tray. It lay between the marmalade pot and the untouched dish of deviled kidneys, folded in yellowed paper and sealed with a blob of dark wax that had cracked at the edge. Lady Westhaven had chosen breakfast for the unveiling because breakfast was the one meal at which cruelty could wear a wrapper of domestic calm. The long windows of the morning room stood open to a pale sky. A mild wind moved the curtains. Lord Westhaven sat behind the newspaper, though his eyes had not moved across the page for several minutes. Lavinia toyed with a slice of toast and watched Cecily as a cat watched a closed door. The Duke had not yet come down. That, Cecily understood at once, was no accident. "Cecily," Lady Westhaven said, lifting the old letter with 2 fingers, "there is a matter we must settle before this household is made ridiculous by further misunderstanding." Cecily set down her teacup. "What matter, my lady?" "Your position." The word entered the room like a draught under a locked door. Cecily felt Lavinia's attention sharpen. Lord Westhaven lowered his newspaper 1 inch. "My position has been explained to me many times." Clearly not with sufficient firmness. Lady Westhaven placed the letter on the table but did not yet release it. "His Grace has developed an unfortunate impression that you have been treated with less than generosity. I cannot think where he acquired such a notion." Lavinia smiled into her tea. "Some people make neglect look very becoming." Cecily looked at her cousin, then back to the letter. The paper was old, but not old in the way her father's letters had been. Her father had folded his correspondence neatly, almost mathematically. This paper had been folded with haste or imitation. The seal was wrong as well. Not entirely wrong. That was what made it dangerous. A casual eye might have accepted the dark wax and family crest as proof enough. Cecily had been a child at her father's desk, watching him press his own seal into red wax beside the inkstand. She remembered the little nick on the left side of the Harcourt crest where the silver had worn thin. This seal had no nick. This seal was too perfect. "What is that?" she asked. Lady Westhaven's brows rose. "You do not recognize it?" "No, how convenient," Lavinia murmured. Lord Westhaven folded the newspaper at last. "It is a letter from your father to me, written shortly before his death. It concerns your care." Cecily's fingers tightened beneath the table. Her father had died 9 years earlier, in a fever that had taken 3 days to turn a strong man into a memory. He had left behind books, debts according to the Westhavens, and a daughter too young to argue with adults who spoke of sacrifice while taking possession of her keys. "May I read it?" she asked. Lady Westhaven's lips pressed together, but Lord Westhaven gave a stiff nod. "There is no reason to hide what was written for your benefit." Lady Westhaven passed it across. The paper felt brittle and faintly powdery beneath Cecily's hand. The handwriting imitated her father's slant, but the letters stood too carefully, as if someone had studied the shape of him without understanding the motion. "My dear Westhaven," it began. "If my affairs should prove less orderly than I once believed, I must entrust my daughter to your Christian generosity." Cecily continued reading. Each sentence lowered her further. Her father allegedly confessed that imprudence had reduced her expectations, that she would be fortunate to remain under the Earl's guidance, that gratitude and obedience would be her safest inheritance. By the final line, Cecily could hear Lady Westhaven's voice inside the words, though the ink claimed to be her father's. She looked up slowly. "I have never seen this." "You were a girl," Lord Westhaven said, "and in no state to understand practical affairs. I understood my father's hand." Lady Westhaven's teacup touched its saucer with a sound like a warning. "Grief makes memory theatrical." "No," Cecily said. "Grief made some things sharper." Lavinia leaned back, her eyes bright. "Are you accusing Papa of lying?" "I am saying this does not look like my father's writing." The room changed. Not visibly. Not enough for a servant to notice from the door. But the 3 Westhavens closed around her in silence, each in a different way. Lord Westhaven with offended dignity. Lady Westhaven with cold calculation. Lavinia with pleasure. "That," Lady Westhaven said, "is an ugly suggestion from a young woman who has eaten our bread for nearly a decade." Cecily looked at the letter again. The word bread struck her harder than it should have. There it was. The price of every meal, every candle, every altered gown, every hour spent making Westhaven Hall appear gracious. She had not been sheltered. She had been reminded, gently and daily, that she was a debt walking in borrowed shoes. "If my father had wished me to know this," she said, "why was I never told?" Lord Westhaven's face darkened. "Because your father begged me to spare you the humiliation. And yet you have not spared me much else." Lavinia's chair scraped softly. "Cecily." Lady Westhaven lifted a hand. "Let her continue. It is useful to hear what ingratitude sounds like when it has been encouraged by a duke." At that exact moment, the morning-room door opened. Lucian Pembroke entered with the stillness of a man who had heard enough from the corridor to understand where the room had gone wrong. He was dressed for the morning in a dark coat, his cravat plain, his expression unreadable. He paused just inside the doorway and bowed with impeccable courtesy. "I beg your pardon. I was told breakfast was still being served." Lady Westhaven rose too quickly. "Your Grace. We did not expect you for another quarter hour." "Evidently." His gaze moved from her face to the letter in Cecily's hand. "Have I interrupted?" Lord Westhaven stood. "A private family matter. Miss Harcourt appears to be present." "She is the subject of it," Lady Westhaven said. "Not every subject is granted a voice in its own discussion." The Duke's eyes flicked to Cecily. "Is that so?" Cecily could have surrendered the letter then. She could have allowed him to take the matter from her hands, lift it into the clean air of male authority, and make the room tremble for reasons that no one could call improper. For 1 weak second, she wanted that. She was tired of being brave in rooms arranged against her. Then she saw the torn place card in memory, saw Annie's frightened face, heard her father telling her that Harcourts did not beg. She kept the letter. "His lordship says this was written by my father," she said. "I believe it was not." Lady Westhaven inhaled. Lavinia stared at her as if she had stepped into the center of the room without being called. The Duke did not move closer. "Why?" he asked. One word. Not disbelief. Not rescue. Permission. Cecily looked at the paper. "The hand is too deliberate. My father wrote quickly when he was troubled. His lower letters leaned more sharply. And the seal is wrong." Lord Westhaven gave a strained laugh. "The seal is a Harcourt seal." "It is a Harcourt crest," Cecily said. "Not my father's seal." Lucian's attention sharpened. "How can you tell?" There was a small flaw in the silver. A nick on the left side. It always left an uneven mark in the wax. "This mark is clean." Silence followed. Lavinia's face lost a little color. Lady Westhaven recovered first. "A childish memory of a trinket is hardly evidence." "It is not a trinket," Cecily said. "It is how my father signed his name when ink was not enough." The Duke took one step into the room, then stopped. "May I see the letter?" Cecily hesitated. Not because she doubted him. Because surrendering it felt like surrendering the first thing in years that had answered her back. Lucian seemed to understand. "You needn't give it to me if you don't wish to." Lady Westhaven's mouth tightened at the contraction, at the softness hidden inside formal restraint. Cecily rose and carried the letter to him herself. It was a small act, only a few feet across a carpet. It felt like crossing 9 years. Lucian accepted the paper without touching her fingers. He read quickly, but not carelessly. When he reached the end, his expression did not change. That was how Cecily knew the letter had angered him. Men like Lord Westhaven showed displeasure because they wanted obedience. Men like the Duke concealed it because they were deciding where to place the blade. "Did your father write like that?" he asked. The question was quiet enough that no one could accuse him of spectacle. It reached Cecily anyway. No one had asked her that before. Not after the funeral. Not when her father's desk was locked. Not when the accounts were taken away. Not when Lady Westhaven began referring to charity in the same tone other women used for lace. Cecily swallowed once. "No," she said. "But no one has ever asked me." The Duke folded the letter along its old crease, exactly as it had been. "Then someone should have." Lord Westhaven's voice came out too loud. "Your Grace, I cannot allow the word of a dependent young woman to cast suspicion upon my honor." "Then let us hope your honor is sturdier than the paper defending it." Lady Westhaven went pale with fury. "You speak as if we have done wrong by her." Lucian looked at Cecily, not them. "Would you like the matter examined by a solicitor?" The offer should have relieved her. Instead it frightened her. Solicitors belong to men, to money, to rooms where women waited outside while their futures were named without them. "I do not know," she said honestly. "That is an answer." "It is a poor one." "No," he said. "It is the first answer in this room that has not pretended to be certain." Something in Cecily's chest loosened painfully. Lady Westhaven saw it and struck where she could. "How touching! But you forget yourself, Cecily. His Grace is not your guardian." Cecily turned back to the Countess. The old fear rose, dressed as prudence. Beneath it, something quieter stood firm. "No," she said. "That may be why he asked." No one spoke. Outside, beyond the morning room windows, the sky brightened over the lawns of Westhaven Hall as if the day had no idea what had just begun inside. The Duke held the folded letter in one hand and waited, not as a rescuer claiming a cause, but as a witness offering space. Cecily looked at the seal one last time and understood that the torn place card had only shown where they had put her. This letter might show how they had kept her there. The Duke of Alder-mere left Westhaven Hall before sunset that same day, and by doing so, he made the entire household more anxious than if he had remained beneath its roof. He did not depart in anger. That would have given Lady Westhaven something to name, soften, and explain. He departed with perfect courtesy, thanking his hosts for their hospitality, bowing to Lavinia with faultless restraint, and informing Lord Westhaven that he had accepted temporary lodging at the Ellisons' dower house 3 miles away while certain estate business required his attention. The reason was plausible. That made it worse. A duke did not need to justify his movements, yet the choice spoke clearly enough. He would not be trapped inside a house where truth was being arranged for him like flowers in a vase. Cecily watched his carriage roll down the drive from the small window at the turn of the east staircase. She told herself she was relieved. His absence would ease the pressure in the air. His absence would let the house return to its old rules, and old rules, however cruel, were at least familiar. But when the last carriage wheel vanished beyond the beech trees, Westhaven Hall seemed to exhale around her with a satisfaction that felt like warning. Lady Westhaven did not mention the letter again that evening. Lord Westhaven spoke at dinner of crops, rents, and a neighbouring squire's gout. Lavinia praised the weather as if no one had ever torn a card, forged a kindness, or watched a duke read an old letter with murderously calm eyes. Cecily ate little and slept less. Before dawn, she lit the small candle on her writing desk and drew out a sheet of paper she had been saving for months because good paper was not given freely to dependent cousins. She wrote to Mr. Abel Fenwick, solicitor of Chancery Lane, whose name she remembered from her father's old account books. Her hand did not tremble until she reached the sentence asking whether any settlement had been left in her name. Then she stopped, pressed the side of her thumb against the ink stain on the pen, and thought of her father's seal. She finished the letter. She sanded it, folded it, and sealed it with plain wax, for she owned no crest. At breakfast, she gave it to Annie with 6pence from the little purse she kept hidden beneath her lavender sachets. "Post it yourself, if you can," Cecily whispered. "Not with the house letters." Annie's eyes widened. "Miss, if her ladyship finds out, then she will say I have been troublesome," Cecily said. "She says that already." The girl's fear softened into loyalty. "I'll see it goes." By 11 o'clock, the front bell rang. Not the hurried ring of a tradesman. Not the familiar announcement of a neighbour. A measured pull, followed by the solemn movement of servants remembering rank. Cecily was in the morning room, replacing blue thread in Lady Westhaven's embroidery box while the Countess dictated a note to Lavinia. The butler entered carrying a silver salver. Upon it lay a visiting card. Lady Westhaven took it, read the name, and went very still. "His Grace, the Duke of Alder-mere," she said. Lavinia sat straighter at once. "Here?" Evidently on a morning call. Lady Westhaven's eyes moved to Cecily. "You will remain where you are not seen." Cecily lowered the spool of thread. "As you wish." The old obedience came easily to her mouth. It no longer reached all the way inside her. Lady Westhaven rose, adjusted the lace at her sleeves, and became, in the space of one breath, the gracious hostess county society admired. Lavinia followed her into the drawing-room with cheeks delicately warmed and hope restored by the simple fact of his return. Cecily remained in the morning-room with the embroidery silks and the silence. Through the half-open connecting door, she heard the formal greetings. Lady Westhaven's voice floated bright and sweet. "Your Grace, we had not dared expect the honour so soon. I hope I have not called at an inconvenient hour." "Never. You must know Westhaven Hall is always at your disposal." "How generous." A pause followed, so slight that another listener might have missed it. Cecily did not. "I came to ask after Miss Harcourt," the Duke said. The embroidery silk slipped from Cecily's fingers. In the drawing-room, Lavinia gave a small laugh. "Cecily? How kind of you. I'm sure she's occupied somewhere. She keeps herself useful. Then I shall wait until she is unoccupied." Lady Westhaven's voice cooled by a degree. "She is not accustomed to receiving morning calls, Your Grace." "Then it is fortunate this one is mine." The words were not loud. They carried through the door like a key turning. A minute later, the Countess appeared in the morning room. Her face was smooth, but 2 spots of colour burned high beneath her diamonds, though it was much too early for diamonds. "His Grace has asked for you." Cecily stood. "So I heard. You will remember that this family's reputation surrounds you even when you are foolish enough to imagine yourself alone." "I shall remember everything, my lady." The Countess studied her as if searching for insolence and finding only composure. That, perhaps, was more aggravating. Come. Cecily followed her into the drawing-room. The curtains had been drawn to admit the pale late morning light, and it rested upon the polished furniture with the cool honesty of day. Lucian stood near the mantel, hat and gloves in one hand, his dark coat immaculate, his expression unreadable. He bowed when Cecily entered. Not the brief acknowledgement given to inconvenient relations. A true bow, measured and visible. Miss Harcourt. She curtsied. Your Grace. Lady Westhaven took the chair nearest them, forcing propriety into place. Lavinia sat with a book she did not intend to read. The Duke waited until Cecily had seated herself before he did the same. That small courtesy did something dangerous to the room. It made neglect visible by contrast. I wish to return this, he said. From inside his coat he drew a tiny folded paper and set it on the table between them. Cecily knew it before it opened. The torn corner of her place card. Her name was not complete upon it, only the lower curve of a letter and the broken edge where Lavinia's hand had damaged the card. Still, it felt unmistakably hers. Lady Westhaven's eyes fixed upon it. Your Grace, surely you did not trouble yourself over a scrap. Evidence has a habit of disappearing in frightened houses. The room went quiet. Lavinia's book lowered by half an inch. Cecily touched the edge of the paper, but she did not take it. Not yet. Why return it to me? Because it belongs to you. Most people would say it belongs in the wastebasket. Most people are careless with proof when it does not concern them. His gaze held hers, steady but not possessive. I thought you might want it. Cecily's throat tightened. She had been given gowns chosen to diminish her, advice meant to silence her, and charity presented like a chain. She could not remember the last time she had been given back something that had been used to hurt her. Thank you, she said. Lady Westhaven leaned forward. What a very grave conversation over dinner stationery. Lucian turned to her. Cruelty often survives by persuading witnesses to call it trivial. The Countess's smile hardened. You are severe this morning. No. Merely attentive. Lavinia shut the book. Cecily has always been sensitive. It's part of her charm when it doesn't make her melancholy. Cecily looked at her cousin. For years she would have let that pass, because defending herself against a feather cut only made the feather appear innocent. But the torn corner lay on the table now, small and undeniable. Sensitivity is not the same as invention, she said. Lavinia blinked. The Duke's gaze did not move, but something in the room shifted towards Cecily, as if her voice had opened a window. Lady Westhaven spoke quickly. Miss Harcourt is tired. Family matters have unsettled her. Then perhaps family matters should be conducted with greater care. You take an unusual interest in them. I take an interest in inconsistencies. His eyes returned to Cecily. Have you considered the solicitor? Lady Westhaven's hand tightened upon the arm of her chair. There is no need to trouble legal men. Cecily looked at the torn paper, then at the Duke. I wrote to one this morning. The silence that followed was not empty. It was crowded with shock. Lavinia's lips parted. Lady Westhaven's face lost its warmth so completely that she seemed carved from pale stone. Even Lucian became very still, though his stillness carried no displeasure. Did you? He asked softly. Yes. In your own name. I have no other that is honest. For the first time since she had met him, the Duke's expression changed openly. Not much. Only a faint easing around the eyes, a quiet recognition that felt more intimate than praise. Then you have done the wisest possible thing. Lady Westhaven rose. This has gone far enough. Cecily, you forget what is owed to those who sheltered you. Cecily picked up the torn piece of card at last and folded it into her palm. No, my lady. I am beginning to remember what may have been owed to me. Lavinia stood so quickly the book slid from her lap. You can't mean to turn against us. I mean to ask what was true before I was taught to be grateful. The Duke rose as well, not to interrupt, not to claim the moment, but to stand where his rank made further cruelty costly. Miss Harcourt, he said, if your letter is interfered with, send word to me through Mrs. Ellison. No explanation will be required. Lady Westhaven gave a laugh so light it nearly trembled. How dramatic! Lucian inclined his head. How necessary! He did not stay long after that. A proper morning call could not be stretched into scandal, and he seemed determined to give Cecily protection without giving society a weapon. When he left, the drawing-room remained bright, orderly, and changed. Cecily stood with the torn card hidden in her glove and her own letter already beyond the gates of Westhaven Hall. For the first time, the family could not be certain where the truth was travelling. By evening, another truth arrived first. A folded London gossip sheet came tucked inside Lady Alison's note, passed from hand to hand with the speed of malice dressed as amusement. Lady Westhaven opened it in the drawing-room, read 3 lines, and sat down without meaning to. Lavinia snatched it next. Her face flamed. Lord Westhaven swore under his breath, then remembered Cecily was present and called it a cough. Cecily did not need to ask. The words were soon whispered by every servant in the corridor and every guest expected at next week's dinner. The Duke of Alder-mere, it seemed, had taken an interest in the nameless cousin of Westhaven Hall. Nameless. Cecily went cold. Then, slowly, she touched the torn card in her glove. Her name was damaged, but not gone. Not anymore. By the time the Westhavens reached London for Lady Alison's dinner, Cecily had been reduced to 3 words in every drawing-room that mattered. The nameless cousin. It was whispered with amusement behind fans, repeated with pity over tea, and sharpened into accusation by women who had never forgiven another woman for being noticed without permission. The phrase followed her from Westhaven Hall to the hired carriage, from the carriage to the narrow steps of Lord Westhaven's London house, and from there into the mirror where she stood while Lady Westhaven's maid arranged her hair with more haste than care. Cecily looked at her reflection and saw no mystery. There was only a woman in a dark green gown, the same altered silk she had worn at the music-hall, with mended gloves and a face trained by years of social weather to reveal very little. Yet society had discovered her, and because it could not decide whether she deserved interest, it called her dangerous instead. Lady Westhaven entered without knocking. You will remember tonight that pity can be mistaken for encouragement. Cecily turned from the glass. Whose pity, my lady? Do not be clever. His Grace has done you a disservice by making you visible before you understood the responsibilities of visibility. Lavinia, seated near the fire in pale rose satin, gave a soft laugh. Poor Cecily! First she was overlooked, and now she is oppressed by attention. It's a very full career for someone with no fortune. Cecily drew on her left glove slowly. Inside it, folded small against her palm, lay the torn corner of the place card. She had begun to carry it not because she wished to remember the insult, but because the insult had become proof that memory could survive handling. Her letter to Mr. Abel Fenwick had been gone for several days. No reply had arrived. That should not have frightened her so deeply, yet each morning when the post came and Lady Westhaven's eyes touched the tray before Cecily's did, a new doubt entered the room. If a reply comes for me while we are in London, Cecily said, I should like it sent to my room unopened. Lady Westhaven's smile did not move. Naturally. Your correspondence is not a matter of interest to me. That was how Cecily knew it had become one. Lady Alison's dinner was held in a townhouse off Grosvenor Square, where the lamps burned behind silk shades and every surface seemed designed to reflect either candlelight or consequence. The guests were not numerous, but they had been chosen with the precision of people invited to witness something without being told what it was. The Duke of Alder-mere arrived shortly after the Westhavens. He greeted Lady Alison, exchanged a few words with Lord Westhaven, and bowed to Cecily with the same visible respect that had made her life difficult from the first evening. He did not come to her at once. That restraint steadied her. A careless man would have made her the centre of gossip by trying to shield her from it. Lucian Pembroke allowed the room to see that he noticed her, then allowed her the dignity of standing on her own feet. Dinner began with cold elegance. Cecily was not placed low tonight. Lady Alison, whether from kindness or mischief, had seated her midway down the table opposite a retired admiral's widow and within easy conversation of the Duke. Lady Westhaven observed the arrangement as if someone had moved a boundary stone on her property. Lavinia smiled too brightly and complimented the flowers. For the first 2 courses, conversation moved safely across opera, rain, horses, and an exhibition at the Royal Academy. Then Lady Wrexham, a thin woman with pearls at her throat and curiosity sharpened by boredom, turned her eyes upon Cecily. "Miss Harcourt, you have become quite the subject of interest." Every fork seemed to grow lighter in every hand. Cecily set down her glass. "That is unfortunate for the subject, Lady Wrexham." A few guests smiled. Lady Wrexham did not. The paper gave so little information. It is impossible to know whether one ought to congratulate you or protect you. Lavinia leaned forward with gentle concern. "I am afraid the paper made too much of nothing. Cecily has lived with us so long that people forget how to describe her. She is family in affection, of course. But not in position?" Lady Wrexham asked. Lord Westhaven made a small sound of disapproval, though not enough to interrupt a titled woman. Lady Westhaven lowered her eyes to her plate, performing distress beautifully. "Cecily's situation has always required delicacy," Lavinia continued. "We have tried so hard to spare her feelings." There it was. Charity wearing pearls. Cecily felt the old pressure to assist in her own diminishment, to smile and make everyone comfortable, to confirm that she had been grateful, sheltered, fortunate, safe. Across the table, Lucian's hand paused near his glass. He did not speak. His gaze rested not on Lavinia, not on Lady Wrexham, but on Cecily, waiting. The waiting was a kind of faith. Lady Wrexham tilted her head. "Forgive me, Miss Harcourt, but society does prefer clarity. Are you a member of the family, or are you a dependent?" Silence entered the room so suddenly that Cecily heard the soft hiss of a candle. The question had been asked lightly enough to be called innocent and directly enough to draw blood if she allowed it. Lady Westhaven's expression pleaded for restraint in a way that promised punishment. Lavinia's eyes glittered. Lord Westhaven looked at his wine as if it might contain an exit. Cecily placed her gloved hands in her lap. Beneath the left glove, the torn card pressed against her palm. She had been trained to answer with gratitude. She had been trained to protect the very people who had made protection necessary. She looked at Lady Wrexham and spoke clearly. "I have been whichever was most convenient to others." The room went still. Not shocked into scandal. Stilled into recognition. The words were too quiet to be vulgar and too accurate to be dismissed. Lady Alison's fan stopped moving. The Admiral's widow looked down, then back up with new respect. Lavinia's face lost its pretty softness. Lady Westhaven made the mistake of inhaling too sharply. That small betrayal travelled farther than any confession might have done. Lucian set down his glass. He did not smile. He did not rescue the moment by turning it into romance or gallantry. He simply stood. Every man at the table shifted as if rank itself had risen with him. "Lady Alison," he said, "your cook has done you credit. Yet I find Miss Harcourt's answer the most honest thing served this evening." Lady Alison, who had the rare gift of understanding power without grovelling before it, inclined her head. "Then we are all improved by having heard it, Your Grace." Lady Wrexham's pearls trembled at her throat. "I meant no offence." "Then you will be relieved," Cecily said, surprising herself, "that I have taken none I do not recognize." A breath of laughter moved through the table and disappeared before it could become rude. It was not triumph. Cecily did not feel triumphant. She felt exposed, as if she had opened a window in a locked room and discovered the air outside was colder than she expected. Yet she did not regret it. For the first time, she had not softened the truth to make cruelty comfortable. Lavinia's fork touched her plate with a delicate chime. "How brave of you to speak so boldly when you know how much has been done for you." Cecily turned to her. "Yes. I am beginning to understand exactly how much." The words passed between them like a folded letter neither could yet read aloud. Lucian's gaze sharpened, but still he did not intrude. The conversation resumed because society was skilled at stepping around cracks in the floor, but the room did not return to what it had been. Cecily could feel the difference. She was no longer only a curiosity. She was a question. After the ladies withdrew, Lady Westhaven drew her aside near a cabinet of painted porcelain. Her voice was low enough not to carry, but every syllable was polished hard. "You have humiliated this family." Cecily looked at the older woman's reflection in the cabinet glass. "No, my lady. I answered a question." You will find there are costs to honesty. There have been costs to silence as well. For a moment, Lady Westhaven's mask slipped. What appeared beneath it was not only anger. It was fear. That frightened Cecily more than anger would have done. Fear made people reckless. Before the Countess could reply, the gentleman entered, and Lucian crossed the room with unhurried purpose. He did not stand too close. He only took the place beside Cecily that the room had tried to deny her. "Miss Harcourt," he said, "Mrs. Ellison tells me you have seen the Royal Academy only once." Cecily understood the offer. A safer subject. A public acknowledgement. A chance to breathe. "When I was 17, Your Grace." Then London has been negligent. London is rarely accused of modesty. His mouth softened, briefly. "Then I shall accuse it on your behalf." Lady Westhaven heard. So did Lavinia. So did half the room. Later, when the Westhavens returned to their London house, the post waited on the hall table. Cecily saw the tray before Lady Westhaven could block it. 3 letters for Lord Westhaven. 2 for the Countess. 1 for Lavinia. None for her. Annie had promised the letter had gone. Mr. Fenwick's chambers were in London. A reply should not have required so many days. Cecily removed her gloves in her room and unfolded the torn card. Her palm had warmed the paper until it no longer felt like an object, but like a warning. Somewhere between her question and its answer, someone had put a hand upon the truth. And this time, Cecily was almost certain whose hand it was. The next morning, Lord Westhaven received the Duke of Alder-mere in his London library and made the mistake of believing that closed doors favoured the guilty. Cecily was not meant to know of the visit. She learned of it because Lady Westhaven ordered her to the back parlour to sort old invitations, then forgot that the back parlour shared a thin wall with the library and that houses built for grandeur were often very poor at keeping secrets. She sat at a small rosewood table with a stack of cards before her, the torn corner of her own dinner card hidden beneath her glove, and heard the butler announce his grace in a voice too respectful to carry much hope. Lord Westhaven greeted him warmly. Too warmly. "Your Grace, what an unexpected honour. I trust Lady Ellison's gathering did not weary you." "Not at all," Lucian replied. "It clarified several matters." A chair shifted. Paper rustled. Cecily stopped sorting invitations. "Then I am glad of it," Lord Westhaven said, though he sounded anything but glad. London conversation has a habit of exaggerating trifles. Miss Harcourt's letter to Mr. Fenwick has not received a reply. The silence was brief, but it had weight. "I cannot answer for the habits of London solicitors." "No. But you may answer for the habits of your household post." Cecily's fingers tightened around a card inviting the Westhavens to a charity breakfast. In the library, Lord Westhaven gave a dry laugh. "My dear Duke, surely you have not called upon me to discuss a young woman's correspondence. I have called to discuss the possibility that someone else has been discussing it first." Another sound followed. A drawer opening. Cecily heard paper placed upon a desk. When Lord Westhaven spoke again, his voice had changed. It had become injured, dignified, and prepared. "Since you are determined to involve yourself, perhaps this will put the matter to rest." "What is it?" "A memorandum. Signed some years ago by Miss Harcourt. It acknowledges that my late cousin's affairs were left in disorder and that she accepted my guardianship in all practical matters. She was young, yes, but not so young that she did not understand obligation." Cecily felt the floor tilt beneath her. Signed by her? No. She had signed receipts for gowns. Notes of thanks. Household lists. Once, after her father's death, Lord Westhaven had placed a page before her and said it concerned the transfer of books from Surrey to Kent. She had been 17 and half blind with grief. She remembered ink. She remembered being told not to distress herself over details. In the library, Lucian said nothing for so long that Cecily could hear the clock on the mantel counting the seconds. "You have had this memorandum all along," he said at last. It seemed unnecessary to display a family embarrassment. Until now. Until Miss Harcourt began making accusations she cannot support. Cecily stood before she meant to, knocking one invitation to the carpet. She did not pick it up. Her breath had become too shallow. A memorandum. Another paper. Another polite chain pulled from a drawer when needed. The library door opened before she could decide whether to flee or step forward. Lucian stood there, his gaze finding her at once. He did not look surprised. That hurt before she understood why. "Miss Harcourt," he said quietly. "May I speak with you?" Lord Westhaven appeared behind him, flushed but composed. "There is no need to trouble her." "There is every need." Lucian's voice remained controlled. That control, which had once steadied her, now felt like a wall. Lady Westhaven came from the hall as if summoned by the scent of danger. Lavinia followed, dressed for morning calls, her bonnet ribbon still untied. In less than 1 minute, Cecily found herself in the small back parlour with the Duke standing near the window, Lord Westhaven at the door, Lady Westhaven seated like a judge, and Lavinia watching as if the day had become a play written for her pleasure. "His Grace has questions," Lord Westhaven said. "Since you have encouraged them, perhaps you will answer." Cecily looked at Lucian. "What paper?" He did not soften the matter. "Your uncle has shown me a memorandum bearing what appears to be your signature." "Appears." The word should have comforted her. It did not. It sounded like distance. "Saying what?" "That you understood your father's affairs to be unsettled and accepted Lord Westhaven's management of any remaining claims." "I never accepted that." "Did you ever sign a paper without reading it fully?" The question was careful. Reasonable. Devastating. Cecily felt heat rise to her face, not from guilt, but from the sudden sense of being placed under glass. "At 17? After my father died. That is why I ask." "No," she said, then stopped. Honesty caught her by the throat. She remembered the library at Westhaven Hall, rain at the window, Lord Westhaven's sleeve brushing the desk as he turned a page toward her. She remembered her own name blurring through tears. "I signed something about my father's books." Lady Westhaven closed her eyes with a delicate expression of sorrow. "There. You see how memory alters itself." "It was about books," Cecily said. "I was told it was about books." Lord Westhaven's voice grew heavy with disappointment. "You were told what you were able to bear." Lucian's jaw tightened, but his next words did not come quickly enough. He looked at Cecily as though weighing proof, motive, timing, consequence. She understood the kind of mind he possessed. It was powerful, disciplined, trained to survive men who lied with good paper and better titles. Yet in that moment, she did not need strategy. She needed the man who had moved his chair before asking for evidence. "May I see it?" she asked. "Not yet," Lord Westhaven said. "Not until this fever of suspicion has cooled." Lucian turned on him. "You will not withhold a document bearing her name." The protection was there. She heard it. She should have clung to it. Instead, she could not forget the question he had asked her first. "Did you ever sign a paper without reading it fully?" Cecily looked at him. "Do you believe I may have done it?" His eyes returned to hers. For the first time since she had known him, he seemed uncertain not of truth, but of the safest way to reach it. "I believe you may have been made to sign something you were not permitted to understand." "That is not what I asked." Lady Westhaven's hand stilled upon her lap. Lavinia's lips parted. Lucian took one step towards Cecily and stopped because propriety, witnesses, and her own dignity all stood between them. "I believe you," he said. "But I must know what they can use against you." "Against me," Cecily repeated softly. "So I am already the case." "No, the paper is the case. The signature is the case. The seal is the case." Her voice did not rise. That made the pain clearer. "You moved your chair beside me before you had proof. Why require it now?" The room went utterly quiet. Lucian looked as if the sentence had struck a place no one else had been allowed to touch. Lady Westhaven recovered first. This is precisely the danger of encouraging sentiment in a dependent girl. She mistakes inquiry for insult. Cecily turned to her. The old fear was still there, but it no longer had the room to command her. "No, my lady. I know insult very well. I have been educated in it." Lavinia's face hardened. Cecily, you're making this worse. For whom? The question landed cleanly. Lavinia looked away. Cecily removed the torn corner of the place card from her glove and set it upon the parlor table. It was small, almost foolishly small, beside the weight of forged letters and memoranda, yet everyone looked at it. This was only paper too, she said. Everyone told me so. She looked once more at Lucian. I am grateful for what you have tried to do, Your Grace. But I will not remain in any house where my truth must wait politely behind another man's proof. His expression changed then. Not dramatically. His face did not collapse. Men like him did not collapse in rooms full of enemies. But something in his eyes went still with regret. Miss Harcourt. No, the word surprised them all, including Cecily. It came softly, yet it closed the distance no one else had been able to define. Not now. Lord Westhaven straightened. You will go to your room until you can speak with proper humility. Cecily picked up the torn card and folded it back into her glove. I will go to my room. She looked at Lady Westhaven, then at Lavinia, then at the door beyond them. But humility will not be the reason. She left before anyone could stop her with another elegant sentence. In the corridor, she walked steadily because servants were watching and because dignity, once chosen, demanded service. Only when she reached her chamber did her hands begin to shake. By twilight, one small trunk lay open on the bed. Cecily placed inside it 2 gowns, her father's old watch, the letter paper she had bought with saved coins, and the torn place card. She did not know where safety lived. She only knew it was no longer here. Before dawn, while the house still slept beneath its own lies, she would find the road to Bath. Cecily left the London house before dawn with 1 small trunk, 12 shillings, and the strange calm of a woman who had finally stopped asking permission to exist. The street outside Lord Westhaven's door lay blue and empty beneath the early lamps. A milk cart rattled somewhere beyond the square. A sleepy footman at the corner glanced at her, saw a plain travelling cloak and a veiled bonnet, and looked away because the world had trained him, as it had trained everyone, not to notice women who appeared to have no consequence. Cecily was grateful for the old invisibility then. It carried her past the railings, past the house where she had been judged by papers she had not been allowed to understand, past the windows behind which Lady Westhaven slept secure in the belief that gratitude was a lock. At the coaching office, Cecily gave her name clearly. Miss Harcourt. Bath. The clerk did not know enough to be surprised. He took her coin, handed her a ticket, and told her the distance would require most of the day with changes. She climbed into the coach among a widow with a birdcage, a clergyman reading sermons, and a young mother who smelled of lavender soap and biscuit crumbs. No one asked why a gentlewoman travelled with only 1 trunk. That was the kindness of strangers. They lacked enough knowledge to wound accurately. As London rolled away behind her, Cecily placed 1 hand over the pocket hidden inside her cloak. Her father's watch rested there, heavy and warm from her body. Beside it lay the torn corner of the place card. She had brought no jewels because she owned none. She had brought no letters of introduction because Lady Westhaven had controlled them. She had brought no certainty at all. Yet with every mile, the air seemed to change inside her chest. Fear remained. It sat beside her like another passenger. But fear was no longer driving. By late afternoon, Bath rose around her in pale stone terraces and damp winter light, elegant enough to intimidate even in exhaustion. Cecily gave the driver the address she had copied from an old note kept between the pages of her mother's prayer book. Mrs. Althea March lived in a narrow house near a quiet square, not grand, but respectable in the exact way lonely women made respectable things endure. When the door opened, the woman who appeared was thinner than Cecily remembered, with silver hair tucked beneath a lace cap and eyes that had once comforted her mother through illness. Mrs. March looked at Cecily's trunk, then at her face. She did not ask a single useless question. "Come in, child," she said. "Whatever has happened, it can wait until you have had tea." Cecily stepped across the threshold and almost wept because no one told her to be grateful for it. The front parlour was small, warmed by a coal fire, and filled with objects kept for meaning rather than display. Mrs. March took her cloak, ordered the maid to bring hot water, and sat opposite Cecily as though receiving her were the most ordinary thing in the world. Only when tea had been poured did she speak again. Now tell me what name I am to give anyone who asks. Cecily looked down at the cup in her hand. My own. Mrs. March's eyes softened. Good. The story did not come out neatly. It came in fragments. West Haven Hall. The torn card. The Duke's chair. The letter with the wrong seal. The memorandum. Her own departure. Mrs. March listened without gasps, which Cecily found steadier than sympathy. When Cecily finished, the older woman rose, unlocked a small writing desk, and placed paper before her. Then write again to this solicitor of yours. Not through any house. Not through any person who owes the West Havens a favor. Directly. I have already written once. Then write twice. Men in offices are more attentive when a woman becomes inconvenient in ink. Cecily almost smiled. She wrote to Mr. Abel Fenwick before supper, requesting copies of any settlements, trusts, transfers, or instructions made in her father's name, and asking that the reply be sent to Mrs. Althea March's address only. Her hand was steadier than it had been the first time. At the bottom, she signed her full name. Miss Cecily Ann Harcourt. Not nameless. Not almost family. Herself. 2 days later, Lady Westhaven's money arrived. It came by special messenger, wrapped in a note that smelled faintly of violet water and command. Cecily read it in Mrs. March's parlour while rain traced the window. Dearest Cecily, your distress has led you into an action that will only deepen misunderstanding. Accept this small assistance and return before gossip wounds you beyond repair. We remain, despite everything, your family. There were banknotes inside. Enough to make refusal foolish. Enough to make acceptance dangerous. Mrs. March watched her over her spectacles. Well. Cecily folded the notes back into the paper. I have been purchased with shelter long enough. Then send it back. Cecily did. Her reply was brief. My lady, I cannot accept money offered to make silence appear like care. I remain, Miss Cecily Harcourt. She sealed it before courage could cool. That evening, Mrs. March's maid brought up a visiting card on a small tray. Cecily knew whose it was before she saw the name. His Grace, the Duke of Alder-mere. Her heart moved painfully. Mrs. March read her face and said, I can refuse him. Cecily looked toward the rain-dark window. No. But I cannot receive him alone. Nor would I permit it. Lucian entered the parlour 5 minutes later, bringing with him the controlled quiet Cecily remembered too well. He bowed first to Mrs. March, then to Cecily. He looked tired, though no one careless would have noticed. His eyes found the returned money upon the table, still waiting for the messenger to carry it away, and something like approval passed through his face. Miss Harcourt, he said. I won't ask you to explain your decision. The contraction in his voice made the formality feel human, and that wounded her more than coldness would have done. That is generous, Your Grace. No. It is late. He remained standing until Mrs. March instructed him, quite firmly, to sit. He did. Cecily kept her hands folded. Did they send you? She asked. No. Did they ask you to find me? Yes. Will you tell them where I am? No. The answer came without hesitation. Something inside Cecily loosened, but she held it carefully. Trust had become a fragile thing, and she would not hand it over simply because he had spoken gently. Then why are you here? Lucian removed a folded note from inside his coat and laid it on the table, not near enough to force her to take it. Because I owed you words that should have been spoken before you had to leave a house alone before dawn. Cecily looked at the note but did not touch it. An apology? Yes. Not an argument. No. Mrs. March, who had been pretending not to listen, turned a page of her book with majestic approval. Cecily lifted the note at last. The handwriting was spare and controlled. Miss Harcourt, I asked what they might use against you when I should first have said that I believed you. I mistook strategy for steadiness. I wounded you while trying to prevent them from doing the same. You owe me no forgiveness. You owe me no explanation. If you require assistance, it will be given without condition. If you require my absence, I will honor that too. Alder-mere. Cecily read it twice because the second reading hurt differently from the first. You did not command me to return. You are not mine to command. The room went very quiet. Rain touched the glass. Mrs. March lowered her book, then raised it again, perhaps deciding that propriety could survive silence better than interruption. Cecily folded the note. I have written to Mr. Fenwick again. Good. I asked for everything. Better. And if the answer proves nothing? Lucian's expression did not soften, but his voice did. Then we will seek another answer. But we will not begin by doubting your memory. We. The word stood between them, dangerous and warm. Before Cecily could reply, the maid entered with a letter on a tray. For Miss Harcourt. By messenger from London. Cecily saw the name of Mr. Abel Fenwick printed in a firm legal hand. Her fingers went cold. Mrs. March stood. Lucian did not move. He did not reach for the letter. He did not claim the right to open truth before she did. Cecily broke the seal herself. The page inside was brief, but the first line changed the shape of the room. Madam, records in my possession confirm that your late father, Mr. Thomas Harcourt, executed a settlement for your benefit before his death. Cecily sat down because the words had taken the strength from her knees. Not from pain. From proof. Her father had not left her penniless. The silence that followed was unlike any silence Westhaven Hall had ever given her. This one did not erase her. It restored the sound of her own name. By the following afternoon, Cecily had learned that proof could feel less like victory than like standing at the edge of a room she had been forbidden to enter. Mr. Fenwick's second packet arrived before luncheon, thick with copied pages, neat explanations, and the dry smell of law offices that had seen too many lives reduced to ink. Mrs. March placed the packet on the parlour table and rang for tea, not because tea could mend the world, but because English women of sense met upheaval with boiling water and something useful for their hands. Cecily opened the papers herself. No one touched them for her. Her father's name appeared first, written in a copy of a settlement executed 6 months before his death. Thomas Harcourt had not left his daughter in charity. He had placed a modest sum in trust for her maintenance until marriage or independent majority, enough to secure clothing, lodging, and a small yearly income. Not wealth. Not luxury. Freedom. Cecily read the amount 3 times before meaning attached itself to the figures. For 9 years, she had been grateful for candles bought with money that may have been hers. She had worn altered gowns under the weight of debt that may never have existed. She had lowered her head to people who had possibly fed her with one hand while closing the other around her inheritance. Mrs. March, seated opposite, did not rush her. There is more, Cecily said, though her voice sounded distant to herself. Mr. Fenwick says a later instruction transferred practical control to Lord Westhaven because I was said to be too distressed to manage any claim. Were you? Mrs. March asked. Cecily looked up. I was grieving. That is not the same as being incapable. No, it is not. The older woman's voice carried the weight of a life that had made similar distinctions and not always been heard. Cecily turned the page. The copied signature on the instruction was hers, or near enough to make her stomach tighten. Cecily and Harcourt. Written with the trembling hand of a girl who had cried too much and slept too little. The memory returned with cruel precision. A desk. Rain. Lord Westhaven saying the paper concerned the transfer of her father's books and personal effects. His finger indicating where she should sign. Lady Westhaven standing by the window with a handkerchief pressed to her lips, as if Cecily's grief inconvenienced her tenderness. I signed it, Cecily whispered. I did sign something. Under false explanation. But I signed it. Child, a cage does not become a home because the prisoner touched the door. Cecily closed her eyes. The words steadied her, but they did not erase the shame. Shame was stubborn. It had lived in her too long to move out at the first notice of truth. The maid entered with a card. Mrs. March took it, read it, and glanced at Cecily with a question rather than an announcement. Cecily did not need to ask. Lucian had returned. You may admit his grace, she said. And please leave the door open. Mrs. March's mouth curved. I had no intention of closing it. Lucian entered with a bow to Mrs. March and then to Cecily, his gaze moving once to the papers upon the table and then back to her face. He did not ask whether she was well. That would have been foolish. He did not say he was glad she had proof. That would have been premature. He waited until Mrs. March invited him to sit, and even then he remained at a careful distance from the papers. Mr. Fenwick has written, he asked. Yes. Cecily slid the settlement copy toward him. My father provided for me. Lucian read the first page. His expression remained composed, but the room seemed to grow colder around his stillness. And West Haven controlled the funds. By means of an instruction I apparently signed. His eyes lifted at once. Apparently. I signed a paper. I was told it concerned my father's books. Lucian looked down again, and this time his restraint cost him visibly. Not in movement. In the lack of it. That is not consent. Cecily's breath trembled once. You say that as if it is simple. It is simple morally. Men make it complicated when complication profits them. Mrs. March set down her cup with approval. Cecily looked at the next sheet, then at the folded copy of the letter Lady Westhaven had shown her at breakfast, which Mr. Fenwick had requested and Lucian's man had somehow obtained from a clerk who had seen similar papers pass through Lord Westhaven's hands. There is the letter too, she said. The one claiming my father wished me to remain dependent. Lucian removed a small leather case from his coat. I asked my secretary to retrieve a sample of the Westhaven household seal from a tradesman's receipt. He paused. Only to compare wax impressions. Not to invade your choice. She heard the correction. The care of it. The memory of his wrong question still hurt, but apology had begun to alter its shape. Show me, she said. He opened the case and placed 2 impressions on the table. One was a copied image from the alleged Harcourt letter. The other was from Westhaven Hall. Mrs. March leaned forward. Cecily did too. At first she saw only lines, curves, heraldic marks too small to matter. Then the pattern clarified. The outer crest differed, but a flaw in the border repeated exactly. A shallow break near the lower rim. Not her father's seal. Not the Harcourt nick she remembered. Westhaven. Her heart began to beat slowly and hard. They used their own seal, she said. Altered or recut, Lucian replied. Enough to suggest Harcourt to anyone who would not know the original. Not enough to withstand comparison. Cecily touched the edge of the copied letter. She thought of Lady Westhaven saying grief made memory theatrical. She thought of Lavinia laughing over scraps of paper. She thought of 9 years in grey rooms, measured gratitude, and lowered seats. It was constructed, she said. My poverty. My dependence. The whole story. Yes. Lucian did not soften the word. She was grateful for that. Softness would have made it harder to breathe. For several moments, no one spoke. Rain tapped gently against the window. A carriage passed outside, wheels hissing on wet stone. Bath continued beyond the parlour as if Cecily's life had not been split open on a tea table. What happens now? Mrs. March asked. Lucian looked to Cecily before answering. That depends on what Miss Harcourt wants known. Cecily turned to him, surprised. Not what must be done. Those are different questions. You would leave part of it hidden if I asked. If exposure harms you more than justice helps you, yes. I want them answerable. I do not want your pain turned into public entertainment. The words unsettled her because they were not strategy alone. They were care. Care without claim. Care that stood with its hands visible. And if I want the truth spoken, she asked. Then it should be spoken where denial will cost them. Mrs. March's eyes narrowed. Before witnesses. Before the right witnesses, Lucian said. Not a mob. Not gossip writers. People whose withdrawal will matter to Westhaven more than any courtroom threat at first. Cecily understood. Society had been the weapon used against her. Society could become the first consequence. As if summoned by the thought, another note arrived an hour later, this one addressed to Lucian and carried by a groom in Westhaven livery. He read it once, and something almost like contempt touched his mouth. Lord Westhaven invites me to dine at his London house in 3 days. He writes that Lady Lavinia's friends are eager to meet again under more cheerful circumstances. Mrs. March gave a soft snort, meaning he wishes to restore the girl's prospects and trample the scandal flat. Lucian folded the note. Yes. He looked at Cecily. I will refuse unless you wish otherwise. The old Cecily would have felt relief at being spared. She would have hidden behind distance and called it dignity. But the torn card lay on the table beside the copied settlement, a small damaged thing beside a large hidden crime. Both told the same story. A place had been taken from her, then called charity. If you refuse, she said, they will tell the room whatever story pleases them. Likely. If I go, they will try to make me look ungrateful. Certainly. And if I speak? Lucian's voice lowered. Then I will stand where I am useful, and remain silent where your voice must be heard. Cecily looked at him for a long moment. She had feared becoming another duty to him, another problem solved by rank. Yet here he was, asking where to stand. Then accept, she said. Mrs. March reached across the table and covered Cecily's hand briefly, a chaperone's touch, a motherly blessing, and a warning all at once. Lucian bowed his head, not deeply, but with unmistakable respect. As you choose. The phrase entered Cecily quietly. It did not erase the years. It did not mend the signatures. But it made a small space inside her where fear had been sitting. For the first time since Westhaven Hall, the next room she entered would not be arranged entirely by her enemies. On the morning of the Westhaven dinner, Cecily stood before Mrs. March's parlour mirror and discovered that courage did not feel like fire. It felt like fastening the hooks of a plain ivory gown while one's fingers remained cold. It felt like folding proof into a reticule and wondering whether silk could hold the weight of 9 stolen years. It felt like wanting very badly to stay in Bath, where the chairs did not accuse her and the windows looked upon strangers who knew nothing of her humiliation. Mrs. March sat by the fire with the settlement papers arranged in a neat packet upon her lap. She had dressed in sober plum silk and wore a lace cap with such dignity that no one could have mistaken her for a convenient companion. She looked, Cecily thought, like a woman who had survived disappointment and made it behave. You need not go, Mrs. March said. Cecily met her reflection. I know. His Grace could do what is required without you. He offered. And you refused? Yes. Mrs. March's eyes softened, but her voice did not. Tell me why. Cecily touched the reticule on the dressing table. Inside lay Mr. Fenwick's copied settlement, the comparison of seals, the note from Lady Westhaven offering money, and the torn corner of the first dinner card. Because they used my silence as evidence against me. If I am absent tonight, they will do it again. You are afraid. Very. Good. Fear keeps one attentive. It need not keep one obedient. Cecily almost smiled. Then the front bell rang. A few minutes later, Lucian Pembroke was shown into the parlour, dressed for evening though the hour was still afternoon, as if he had given the coming battle the courtesy of formality. He bowed to Mrs. March, then to Cecily. His gaze moved over her face, not her gown, and stopped there. Miss Harcourt. Your Grace. He did not say she looked well. That would have been untrue. He did not say she looked brave. That would have made bravery another performance. Instead he said, my carriage is ready, but so is my refusal. Cecily looked at him. Your refusal? If you decide at the door that you cannot enter, I'll take you back to Mrs. March before anyone inside has the satisfaction of seeing you hesitate. The contraction, soft and human in his controlled voice, nearly undid her. And the papers? Can wait one more night. Truth has waited long enough. Then I will follow your lead. Mrs. March rose and gathered her gloves. A sentence more men should practice. Lucian accepted the correction with a grave inclination of the head. Cecily drew a careful breath and lifted her reticule. Then let us go before I become sensible. The journey from Bath to London had already been made the previous day, with rooms taken discreetly under Mrs. March's name. The drive that evening through London streets felt shorter and harsher. Lamps glowed against damp paving stones. Carriage wheels hissed. Behind drawn curtains, families arranged themselves for dinners where reputations could be made, repaired, or quietly destroyed. When Lucian's carriage stopped before Lord Westhaven's London house, Cecily did not move at once. Through the window, she saw the familiar steps, the bright fanlight above the door, the footman in livery, and the glow of a household pretending not to be afraid. Lucian's hand rested on the door latch, but he did not open it. "You decide," he said. Cecily pressed her palm around the reticule. The torn card inside seemed smaller than ever and sharper than ever. "I have decided." The door opened. Air struck her face, cool and smelling faintly of rain. Mrs. March descended first. Lucian offered his hand to Cecily, and she accepted because assistance was not surrender when freely chosen. The butler's face changed when he saw her. "Not much." "Enough." By the time they entered the drawing-room, the house knew. Lady Westhaven turned from a cluster of guests with such perfect grace that Cecily almost admired the discipline of it. Lord Westhaven stood near the mantel, red-faced but smiling. Lavinia wore silver gauze over pale blue and looked beautiful in the brittle way of glass placed too near an edge. Lady Ellison was present. So was Lady Wrexham, the Admiral's widow, and 3 families whose approval Lavinia had counted upon. The audience had been chosen to restore the Westhavens. Now it would witness something else. "Cecily," Lady Westhaven said, crossing the room with both hands extended. "What a relief! We were so distressed by your sudden departure." Cecily let the hands take hers, then released them gently. "Were you?" A faint silence opened. Lady Westhaven's smile remained. "Of course. Family cannot be easy when one of its own is wandering in distress." Mrs. March stepped beside Cecily. "Miss Harcourt has been neither wandering nor without care." Lucian added nothing. He did not need to. His presence behind Cecily made every false kindness more expensive. Dinner was announced before Lady Westhaven could attempt a second embrace. The procession moved with all the old rules, but tonight Cecily heard the machinery beneath them. Rank first. Marriageable daughters displayed. Widows placed according to usefulness. Men arranged by influence. Women arranged by what their presence could purchase. In the dining room, Cecily saw her place at once. Not low. Not near the governess's end. Lady Westhaven had learned caution. Cecily had been placed respectably halfway down the table, near Mrs. March and within Lucian's line of sight. For one strange second, the correction almost looked like victory. Then she saw the card. Miss Cecily Harcourt. Not Miss Cecily Harcourt. Not her full name. An initial. A soft reduction. A way to make her proper without making her whole. Lavinia watched from across the table, her expression innocent. Lucian saw the card, then looked to Cecily. He did not move. He waited. That waiting reached her more deeply than intervention would have done. He had said he would follow her lead. Now he was proving it in a room where power must have burned in his hands. Cecily opened her reticule and removed the torn corner of the old card. It was too small to replace anything by itself, yet it carried her name more honestly than the new one. She set it beside the printed card, then took up the pencil placed for menu corrections and wrote, in a steady hand, Cecily and Harcourt. The Admiral's widow saw. Lady Ellison saw. Lady Westhaven saw and went very still. Cecily sat before anyone could instruct her otherwise. Dinner began with a strained elegance that no amount of silver could rescue. Lord Westhaven spoke of reconciliation. Lady Westhaven spoke of misunderstanding. Lavinia praised forgiveness as if she had invented it for the use of others. Cecily ate enough to keep her hands occupied and listened as the family built a soft wall of words around the truth. Lucian spoke little. When he did, he addressed Cecily directly on harmless matters, giving her neither spotlight nor abandonment. Once, a gentleman near the foot of the table attempted to ask Mrs. March how long she had known the Harcourts. Cecily answered before the older woman could. Long enough to remember my mother's kindness and my father's prudence. Lord Westhaven's fork paused. Lady Westhaven recovered with a laugh. Dear Cecily has always clung to memory. It comforts her. It corrects me, Cecily said. Comfort is not always its purpose. The words landed quietly, and the table shifted around them. Lavinia's eyes flashed. One hopes memory doesn't become vanity. Cecily looked at her cousin across the candlelight. One hopes beauty does not. Lady Ellison coughed into her napkin. Lucian looked down at his plate, but Cecily saw the brief tension at the corner of his mouth. It was not amusement alone. It was pride held in restraint. After the final course, Lord Westhaven rose with a glass in hand. His smile had grown desperate, though only those who knew danger could see it. Before the ladies withdraw, I wish to say a word. Recent days have brought confusion, as all families must sometimes endure. Yet family honor, properly understood, is not a fragile thing. It is strengthened by loyalty, charity, and forgiveness. Lady Westhaven looked at Cecily with warning wrapped in appeal. Lavinia looked satisfied, as if the toast itself had settled the matter. Lucian's gaze found Cecily. He did not lift his glass. He did not rise. He waited. Cecily placed her napkin beside her plate. Her hand did not shake. Then, she said, and the room heard every word, let us speak of family. The silence that followed was no longer accidental. It was an open door. Lady Westhaven's face emptied of colour. Lord Westhaven lowered his glass by an inch. Cecily stood, not quickly, not dramatically, but with the calm of a woman who had already crossed the hardest threshold before entering the room. Not here, she said. The servants have carried enough of our burdens. Lady Ellison rose at once. The drawing-room, then. Chairs moved. Silk rustled. No one pretended now that the evening was ordinary. As the guests withdrew, Lucian came to Cecily's side, still leaving the proper distance, still giving her the dignity of space. Are you certain? He asked quietly. Cecily looked toward the drawing-room doors, where the Westhavens waited beneath the lamps they had lit to display their own respectability. No, she said. But I'm finished being absent from my own life. Then she walked forward, and this time the room made way. The drawing-room received them with the bright cruelty of a stage already lit. Lamps glowed beneath rose-colored shades. The fire had been stirred too high, as if warmth could disguise judgment. Lady Westhaven moved to the center of the room with the poise of a hostess determined to remain hostess even while the floor beneath her began to give way. Lord Westhaven stood by the mantel, one hand still around the stem of his glass. Lavinia kept near the pianoforte, pale and glittering, her beauty sharpened by fear. The guests arranged themselves without instruction. Lady Ellison sat where she could see every face. Lady Wrexham hovered near a side table, too curious to retreat and too cautious to appear eager. Mrs. March took her place beside Cecily, not touching her, but close enough to make the support visible. Lucian remained several feet away, positioned where no one could pass Cecily without passing him first. It was not ownership. It was a boundary. Cecily looked at the people who had once made her feel grateful for a chair at the end of a table, then opened her reticule. The room watched the movement as if she had drawn a blade. She drew out paper. Only paper. That was what they had all called it when paper wounded her. A torn card. A letter. A memorandum. A signature. A life made smaller by ink. She placed the torn dinner card on a small rosewood table near the fire. The old damaged corner lay beside the newer card from that evening, where her full name now stood in her own hand. You asked us to speak of family honor, Cecily said. Her voice did not fill the room by force. It made the room lean closer. I would like to begin with where family honor seated me. Lady Westhaven gave a soft laugh. My dear child, surely we are not to revisit a trifling arrangement of chairs. No, Cecily said. We are to revisit the habit beneath it. Lord Westhaven's face darkened. This is most improper. Lady Ellison lifted her fan. Impropriety is often less exhausting than concealment, my lord. A few eyes turned toward her. She did not look away. Cecily took out the old letter, the one allegedly written by her father, and placed it beside the card. This was shown to me as proof that my father wished me dependent on Westhaven charity. Lady Westhaven's voice cooled. Because he did. No, Cecily said. The word was simple. It did not tremble. He did not. Lord Westhaven stepped forward. You cannot possibly make such a claim before guests who know nothing of our private affairs. Lucian spoke for the first time. That is soon corrected. The door opened. The butler entered with a stiff face and announced, Mr. Abel Fenwick. A thin gentleman in sober black followed him, carrying a leather portfolio and the grave discomfort of a man who knew he had been invited into a social room to perform a legal necessity. He bowed to Lady Westhaven, then to the company, then to Cecily. Miss Harcourt. Lady Westhaven's face went white beneath its powder. A solicitor? In my drawing-room. After dinner, Lucian said, and before witnesses. Perfectly inconvenient, but not unlawful. Mr. Fenwick cleared his throat. I will be brief. Miss Harcourt requested copies of documents held by my office concerning a settlement executed by her late father, Mr. Thomas Harcourt. Those documents confirm that provision was made for her maintenance, lodging, and independent support. A murmur moved through the room. Lavinia gripped the back of a chair. That doesn't mean anything, she said. Families manage such things all the time. Mrs. March looked at her. Some families manage. Others consume. Lord Westhaven rounded on the solicitor. You exceed yourself, sir. Any control exercised was proper. I have not yet said otherwise, Mr. Fenwick replied carefully. I have said only that funds existed. Cecily took out the copied memorandum and laid it beside the letter. This paper bears my signature. I was told it concerned the transfer of my father's books after his death. I was 17. I was grieving. I was not told that I was surrendering control of any claim. Lady Westhaven pressed a hand to her chest. You wound us beyond measure. We sheltered you. Cecily looked at her. With money my father left for me. The silence after that sentence was not polite. It was stripped bare. Lord Westhaven set his glass down too hard, but the sound only made him look less certain. You have no proof of bad faith. Lucian moved then. Not toward Cecily. Toward the table. He placed 2 wax impressions beside the letter. The seal used on the alleged Harcourt letter matches a damaged border from the Westhaven household seal, altered just enough to mislead anyone unfamiliar with Thomas Harcourt's personal seal. Miss Harcourt was familiar with it. That is why she questioned the letter before any of us did. Lady Wrexham whispered, Good heavens. Lady Westhaven turned on Cecily with sudden feeling, and for once the feeling was real. You would destroy us over old misunderstandings. Cecily felt the old training rise within her. Be gentle. Be grateful. Make it easier for them. She let the training pass through and leave. No, my lady. I am done being destroyed quietly so that you may remain comfortable. Lavinia's eyes filled, though whether from shame or rage, Cecily could not tell. You always envied me, she said. You couldn't bear that I had a place. Cecily looked at the girl who had torn her card with a smile and mistaken elegance for worth. I did not envy your place, Lavinia. I grieved that you needed mine taken away in order to feel secure in yours. The words landed more deeply than anger would have done. Lavinia looked away first. Lord Westhaven drew himself up, trying to recover the old authority that had once filled rooms for him. Whatever errors were made, they are family matters. They will be settled privately. No, Lucian said. 1 syllable. A Duke's syllable. They will be settled properly. Lord Westhaven stiffened. Is that a threat? It is a withdrawal. You will have no support from Alder-mere in Parliament, in county matters, in credit, in introductions, or in any negotiation where my name might have steadied yours. You sought my favour while diminishing the woman whose fortune you controlled. I find the combination distasteful. The word was quiet. It ruined more than a shout. Lady Westhaven sat down as if her knees had forgotten society. Lady Ellison closed her fan. I fear my carriage must be called soon. It seems the evening has given us much to consider. That was the first public consequence. Not a scream. Not a scandal sheet. Withdrawal. The polite turning of backs that aristocratic houses feared more than open insult. One by one, faces changed. Lady Wrexham no longer looked amused. The Admiral's widow looked directly at Cecily and inclined her head. Not pity. Respect. Mr. Fenwick gathered the copies, leaving one set before Cecily. Miss Harcourt, my office will proceed as you instruct. As you instruct. The room heard it. Cecily heard it most of all. She touched the papers, then the torn card. I instruct you to restore what can be restored, and to account for what cannot. Lord Westhaven's mouth tightened. Cecily. For the first time, her name in his voice held no possession. Only fear. She looked at him and felt no triumph. Triumph would have tied her to the room. She felt grief, and beneath it, release. You told me gratitude was my safest inheritance, she said. You were wrong. Lady Westhaven whispered, after all we did. Cecily turned to her. That is the point, my lady. No one spoke. The fire shifted. Somewhere beyond the door, a servant moved quietly, then stopped, as though even the hallways were listening. Lucian did not come forward to claim her victory. He did not ask for her hand before the watching room. He let the moment remain hers, whole and unborrowed. Cecily lifted the torn place card and folded it once. She placed it in her reticule beside the settlement papers, not as a wound now, but as proof that she had survived the telling of it. Then she faced the guests. I apologize that you were brought here under false pretenses, she said. But I will not apologize for the truth. Lady Ellison rose. Nor should you. That was enough. The room began to move. Guests murmured, not with gossip's hungry delight, but with the constrained shock of people who had seen a polished household crack and found something rotten beneath the gilt. Mrs. March came to Cecily's side. Lucian waited until Cecily looked at him. Only then did he step near enough to speak in a low voice meant for her alone. May I see you safely to Mrs. March's carriage? Cecily looked back at the room, at Lady Westhaven's fallen composure, at Lord Westhaven's defeated anger, at Lavinia's pale silence. Then she looked at the man who had learned not to turn protection into possession. Yes, she said. Outside, the night air struck cool and clean against her face. Carriage lamps trembled along the street. Behind her, Westhaven House glowed as if nothing had changed, but Cecily knew better. Its windows were bright. Its secrets were not. Lucian stood beside the carriage door and did not reach for her until she offered her hand. Miss Harcourt, he said, may I call tomorrow? Not may I repair you. Not may I claim what I defended. Only may I call. Cecily stepped into the carriage with Mrs. March waiting inside, the papers in her reticule, and her name restored to her own keeping. Tomorrow, she said, you may. 3 weeks after the drawing-room reckoning, Cecily woke in Bath to the unfamiliar sound of her own future arriving by post. It came in Mr. Fenwick's firm legal hand, sealed with ordinary red wax, and delivered to Mrs. March's parlour while rain silvered the windows and the kettle sang upon the hob. Cecily opened it at the small table where she had once unfolded proof with trembling fingers. This time, her hands were steady. Lord Westhaven had agreed, under pressure no gentleman could publicly resent, to restore the remaining settlement funds and submit accounts for what had been spent under his management. The sum was not grand enough to turn Cecily into an heiress, but it was enough to alter the shape of every room she entered. Enough for her own lodging. Enough for her own gowns, chosen without apology. Enough to refuse charity when charity was only another word for control. Mrs. March read the letter after her and gave one satisfied nod. There. Not justice in full, perhaps, but justice with its boots on. Cecily laughed softly, and the sound surprised her. She had not known laughter could return without asking permission. News of the Westhavens travelled more quickly than Mr. Fenwick's letter. Lady Ellison withdrew from 2 committees on which Lady Westhaven depended for influence. Lady Wrexham, who could ruin a reputation by lowering her eyelids at the correct moment, began referring to Westhaven Hall as that unfortunate house. Lavinia's expected understanding with a Viscount's son dissolved after his mother decided that questionable settlements and public desperation made unsuitable wedding lace. Lord Westhaven remained in London, pretending to consult men of business while men of business began consulting one another about him. Lady Westhaven wrote Cecily once. The note was elegant, wounded, and unsigned at the end in the old affectionate style. Cecily read it, felt the familiar pull of guilt, and then placed it in the fire unopened beyond the first line. Some doors did not need to be slammed. It was enough not to walk through them again. Lucian called every third day, never earlier than propriety allowed and never later than hope could bear with dignity. He came with Mrs. March present, brought no extravagant gifts, and asked no questions that tried to hurry Cecily past herself. Sometimes they spoke of Mr. Fenwick's accounts. Sometimes of music. Once, of the first time he had noticed her in the entrance hall at Westhaven Hall, where she had stood as though she expected the wall to be kinder than the people. Cecily looked at him over her teacup. "You noticed that?" "I noticed the wall had better manners." Mrs. March made a sound suspiciously close to amusement behind her book. Slowly, the apology he had written became less important than the manner in which he lived after writing it. He asked. He waited. He listened when she disagreed. He did not make protection feel like a debt. Near the end of the 4th week, he invited Cecily and Mrs. March to Briarwell Park in Hampshire for a short visit, properly attended, with Lady Ellison joining as additional respectability. "You needn't accept," he said, standing in Mrs. March's parlour with his hat in his hand. "I know," Cecily replied. That was why she did. Briarwell Park stood 6 miles beyond Winchester, set among low green hills and winter-bare trees that looked silver in the morning light. It was larger than Westhaven Hall, older, and far more powerful, yet it did not announce its greatness by making others small. The servants moved with calm efficiency, not fear. The housekeeper greeted Cecily by her full name. The steward, encountered in the hall with estate ledgers beneath one arm, bowed to her as if her opinion might someday matter there, though no one had told him to perform such courtesy. Cecily noticed everything. The mended curtain in a small sitting room rather than a discarded one. The footman thanked by name. The elderly gardener invited indoors for hot broth after rain. Authority lived in Briarwell Park, but it did not seem to require cruelty for proof of life. On the second afternoon, Lucian walked with Cecily and Mrs. March through the long gallery, where Pembroke ancestors watched from gilt frames with all the severity expected of the dead. Lady Ellison had been claimed by the housekeeper for an inspection of the china closet, which she accepted with theatrical resignation. Mrs. March lingered near a portrait of a formidable duchess, close enough for propriety and far enough for kindness. Lucian stopped before the tall windows overlooking the south lawn. "I have been thinking about what to ask you," he said. Cecily looked out at the pale fields. "That sounds dangerous." "It is. I used to believe questions were safest when I knew the answer before asking. And now? Now I am learning that the answer matters less if the person asked has no freedom to refuse." She turned then. His face was composed, but not cold. That was the difference time had made visible. "Cecily, I love you." The words were quiet. They did not seize the room. They offered themselves to it. "I love your judgment, your courage, your inconvenient accuracy, and the mercy you still possess after being denied so much of it. I want you beside me. Not because you require protection. Not because justice has made romance convenient. Because every room is truer when you are in it." Cecily's breath left her slowly. Mrs. March became deeply interested in the Duchess's painted sleeve. Lucian did not step closer. "Will you marry me?" he asked. "If your answer is no, I'll honor it. If it is not yet, I'll wait. If it is yes, I will spend my life remembering that your place beside me is not something I grant. It is something I am trusted to deserve." Tears rose then, not violently, not with the old humiliation that had once burned behind her eyes, but with the ache of being seen so carefully that hiding became unnecessary. "I will not be ornamental," she said. "I know. I will not be hidden when I am inconvenient. I would expect inconvenience regularly. And I will not be grateful for basic respect as if it were a jeweled gift." Lucian's mouth softened. "Then I must offer better gifts." She smiled through the tears. "Yes," she said. "I will marry you." Mrs. March closed her eyes briefly, perhaps in prayer, perhaps in relief. Lucian did not kiss Cecily. Not there, beneath ancestral portraits and a chaperone's exacting presence. He only took her gloved hand when she offered it and bowed over it with such reverence that the gesture felt more intimate than any impropriety could have been. The wedding took place in early spring, quiet by ducal standards and enormous by the measure of Cecily's old life. Lady Alyson wept discreetly. Mrs. March wept without pretending otherwise. Mr. Fenwick sent a silver inkstand as if to bless every document Cecily would sign hereafter with full knowledge and a steady hand. No invitation was sent to Westhaven Hall. No explanation was required. Months later, at Briarwell Park, Cecily stood in the dining room before the first formal dinner she would host as Duchess of Alder-mere. The table shone beneath candlelight. Silver gleamed. Crystal waited. Yet she found herself looking not at grandeur, but at the place cards. Her hand paused over one near the head of the table. Her Grace, the Duchess of Alder-mere. The letters were engraved in black upon thick ivory card, whole and clean and impossible to mistake for anyone else's charity. Lucian came to stand beside her. "Is it correct?" he asked. Cecily touched the edge of the card. In her private writing desk, wrapped in tissue, lay a torn scrap with part of her old name still visible. She had kept it, not because the wound ruled her, but because it reminded her that a damaged thing could become evidence, and evidence could become freedom. "Yes," she said. "It is correct." Guests began to gather beyond the doors. The house waited for her signal. Cecily placed her card beside Lucian's, not below his, not behind him, but at his side. Then she lifted her head and walked into the room where no one would ever again have to wonder where she belonged.